Welcome to this session. In this session, we shall discuss romantic criticism after neoclassical period. As in the as we have seen in the previous session of this block, how neoclassicals were talking about or emphasizing on following nature, following ration, following forms, devices, and they had certain disciplinary limitations of writing literary work. In this session, we shall see how romantic criticism reacted against the principles of neoclassical period and established itself as one of the leading and most influential schools of criticism. We should understand the basic of romantic criticism. Romantic criticism defines the four major grounds of literary production: nature, inspiration, imagination, confession. Nature for romantics is different from the ideas of neoclassical connotations of nature. For romantics, nature is environment. It doesn't have any identical trait of what neoclassical called reason or ration of human being. Cloud, flower, sky, wind, cliffs, mountains, leaf are all the elements of nature. And they are the enforcing inspiration, and they are the subjects of romantic poets. And the romantic critics try to find out these traits of poetry. The second, inspiration. We have already talked about inspiration in previous sessions, from Plato to Aristotle to Dr. Johnson, Dryden. Romantic followed the idea of inspiration, say Platonic idea of inspiration. Romantic poets, as Wordsworth thinks, that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. The spontaneous is much identical to the state of mind in which Plato's poet does not aware of his existence, yet he composes poetry. As he thinks that true poets are possessed by divine inspiration, so romantics accept it and welcome it. But it is not the poet or creator who can inspire for romantics. The poetry can inspire because poetry describes nature. It describes the relationship between man and nature. It describes the power of nature and it describes the nature who has power to nourish human being. Third is imagination. Imagination is above imitation and understanding. Understanding is identical to the idea of neoclassical. Imagination for romantics is everything. Without imagination, poetry cannot be possible. The height of imagination determines the height of literature. And fourth, which is a very important element of romantic literature as well as of criticism, is confession. And out of this trait, literary critics called romantic criticism as impressionistic criticism, because romantic critic tries to find out the description of the experience of the self, how the self of the poet experiences outward, is the subject of romantic literature and criticism. A romantic critic tries to find out how the self of the poet experiences the outward and how does he express in his own words, how does he look the world he has created being at a state of time. So confession or expression of the self is one of the fundamentals of romantic poetry, and romantic critics tries to find out the confessional elements in the literature. A romantic critic thinks that the experience of the self is the efflux of the world. For romantic critics, artificiality is trash, because artificiality kills imagination. Rational views of institutions or ideologies demand some artificial expression, but nature does not demand the artificial expression. It needs imagination to be expressed by a poet in metaphorical way. On the basis of these propositions, we can read four major works of Romantic critics: lyrical ballads, preface to lyrical ballads, Biographia Literaria, and the Defense of Poesy by Shelley. We may also include letters of Keats, where sporadically John Keats has defined the laws of expressing the self. Let us understand how these works developed literary criticism and why they were called impressionist critics, and why people who looked at literature from author's point of view or the point of view of self-expressibility are called impressionist, which later became the point of censorship for Romantic criticism in the hand of new critics. Lyrical ballads is a collection of poems. Let us understand it. We need to understand the difference between lyrical ballads and preface to lyrical ballads. Lyrical ballads is a collection of poems. There are of course some prose works, but basically it is a collection of poems which was joint venture of Wordsworth and Coleridge both, published in 1788. It is one of the seminal manifestos of Romanticism, undoubtedly, because the poems which are compiled in this book are in no way communicate to the traits of neoclassical poetry. The poets of this collection feel free to express their self in full authoritative liberty. They seemed not to imitate anybody but their own self. Later Wordsworth added a preface to lyrical ballads, which was an apology for his poetry and clarification why he wrote such poetry, which was published in 1800. This piece, the preface to lyrical ballads, is the most remarkable manifesto of Romantic criticism. He states that the poem in this preface, he states that the poems published in 1798 in the form of lyrical ballads were experiments written chiefly to discover how far the language of conversation in the middle and lower classes of society is adapted to the purposes of poetic pleasure. As you know that in the 18th century, means neoclassical period, people were, means poets and writers were following the elite class, mirror the elite class. One example is the Rape of the Lock. MacFluckno. These poems do not have any concern with common people. They followed polished language, artificial language, extravagant language in order to give impact on the mind of elite class people. Whereas poems contained in lyrical ballads are composed intending to communicate the emotions and experiences of the common people. Wordsworth somewhere has also admitted how he used language of common people to express their experiences. He intended to justify the style, subject matter, and language of the poems included in lyrical ballads. He clarified 3 points. Chiefly, first, subject of poetry. He said the subject of poetry is man and nature. Man and nature, not man not of elite class group, or nature not of rational trait, as neoclassical critics and poets have opined on. The subject of romantic poetry or romantic literature is man and nature, and the relationship between man and nature, showing nature has power to nourish human being, human soul. Second, medium of expression. Wordsworth talks about the medium of expression in his preface to Lyrical Ballad. He says that the real language of man should be the medium of expression, and this only will create vivid sensation. And third is, the object of his writing will be the great and universal passion of men, the most general and interesting of all of their occupations and the entire world of nature. So, universality of human passions, human emotions have been reflected in romantic literature, and all these are the objectives of romantic critics. Romantic critics tries to trace out where relationship between nature and man is framing the ideologies of a work of art. How the poet has described the importance of nature more than anything as creator of human consciousness. Romantic critic also tries to find out the common language used by common people, if there is any. Though it has been criticized by Coleridge, I will come on this point later, that there cannot be common language to, any common language to express the real thought of common people. There is no real language of men which needs not imagination, and when you need imagination, then some kind of coloring, some kind of efflux of color will come over it. So Coleridge maintained that the real language of men cannot be possible, the language of poet. But Wordsworth insists on all these things with special reference to his poems and says if composition possibly reflects all these requirements of poetry, then it will interest mankind permanently. Now, in order to put some evidences, we must have instances to justify our discussion. I discussed so far how Wordsworth has seen the poetry and what should be the job or the task of a romantic critic, framing the ideas on the Wordsworthian poetic ideology. I would like to quote some important lines of Wordsworth which decide the subject matters of a critic, because after all when a poet writes something on his own poem, it means he is the critic. First, he is the critic of his own creation. When somebody can apply that idea on his own, that the same idea can be applied on the analysis of others. So, to choose incidents and situations from common life, these are the subjects. Wordsworth is talking about subjects. I would like to quote it from Preface to Lyrical Ballad. To choose incidents and situations from common life and to relate or describe them throughout as far as was possible in a selection of language really used by men. In a selection of language really used by men, and at the same time to throw over them a certain coloring of imagination. See, remember, how can this be possible? These two clauses are contradicting to each other. In a selection of language really used by men, and at the same time to throw over them a certain coloring of imagination. If some colors a select language really used by men, imagination will sure color it. And the coloring with imagination will bring forth some new kind of language, which can be called poetic language. Wordsworth may have this notion in his mind that the selection of language really used by man also needs some kind of coloring of imagination, so that it can be more poetic and more influential and more entertaining and more joyous for common people, as he has said that he is writing poetry for common people so that they can be enjoying words. Whereby, I further quote, whereby ordinary thing should be presented to the mind in the unusual aspect. To make these incidents and situations interesting by tracing in them the primary laws of our nature, chiefly as far as regards the manner in which we associate ideas, a state of excitement, humble and rustic life was generally chosen, because in that condition the essential passions of heart are under less restraint. So there are 5 things in this citation as I have cited. First, subject should be related to incidents, situations from common life. Second, selection of language. Third, that language should be colored with some kind of imagination in order to make the piece of poetry or piece of literature unique, strange. Perhaps this process is the process which was called later by Russian formalist as defamiliarization. And fourth, essential passion of heart under less restraint. This last point is identical to the liberty. Neoclassicals never enjoyed liberty. They wanted to bind themselves in some certain kind of form, and therefore they imitated forms devised by classical literary rulers. The freedom of which Wordsworth is talking about here will be used in coloring the imagination of the ordinary life or the language through which ordinary life is being explained. Further, I quote, after the poetical ideologies of Wordsworth, Coleridge criticizes the views of Wordsworth contained in Preface to Lyrical Ballad. Here we must be much conscious about a fact that Coleridge never criticized poetry of Wordsworth. He criticized Wordsworthian view of Wordsworth's poetry and comes on a conclusion that even Wordsworth could not understand the richness of his composition. He could not understand the power of imagination he has used to make his composition strange, rare, and par excellence. In Biographia Literaria, is the most literary significant critical work. He says that understanding has limited power, or rational evaluation has a limited power, imagination lies beyond understanding and imitation. Unlike Kant, by whom he was much influenced, one can trace out the impression of Kant in the philosophical views of Coleridge. Unlike Kant, he sees the corrective and contextualizing relation of reason to understanding as mediated by the imagination. The completing, I quote Coleridge, the completing power which unites clearness with depth, the plenitude of the sense with the comprehensibility of the understanding is the imagination, impregnated with which the understanding itself becomes intuitive and a living power. Imagination lies beyond understanding. It enriches understanding in better manner. So when Wordsworth uses certain coloring of, or says about certain coloring of imagination on select language really used by common people, and when he performs this task, Collins says he then must be differed from his personality as what he thinks and he creates. Coleridge's views of imagination and specifically of poetic imagination are elaborated in his Biographia Literaria. In the 4th chapter, he differentiates what fancy and imagination is, and said that they are two distinct and widely different faculties. They are not two names with one meaning, or the lower and higher degree of one and the same power. Unquote. Coleridge sees his distinction between these faculties inspired in part by Wordsworth's writing. He says that the primary imagination operates in our normal perception. The secondary imagination, which is poetic, the secondary imagination is the creative one. It gives power to poet, or empowers the poet to conceptualize a new world after seeing the real world. The imagination, I quote, then I consider, Coleridge says, either as primary or secondary. The primary imagination I hold to be the living power and prime agent of all human perception, and as a repetition in the finite mind of the internal act of creation in the infinite I am. The secondary I consider as an echo of the former, coexisting with the conscious will, yet still as identical with the primary in the kind of its agency, and differing only in degree and in the mode of its operation. It dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate, or where this process is rendered impossible, yet still at all events it struggles to idealize and to unify. So the power of the secondary imagination makes an individual powerful poet, and or the poet of influencing ages and influencing people. The critic who tries to trace out these specific literary traits in a work of art is called romantic literary critic. There are some certain views and some questions may be framed on the differences between the opinion of Wordsworth and Coleridge on poetic vision. And we can trace out even this, that the most basic point on which Coleridge differs from Wordsworth is in his insistence that the language of poetry is essentially different from that of prose. Whereas Wordsworth saw that poet as a man speaking to man using the language of real life, Coleridge, like the new critics of the early 20th century, saw poetry as essentially untranslatable into prose. Indeed, Coleridge criticizes the poetic practice of neo-classical writers such as Pope for precisely this, that their poetry took the form of logical argument, and that it seemed to be characterized not so much by poetic thoughts as thoughts translated into the language of poetry. Thus, in the words of Habib, we can say Coleridge acknowledges that poetry is formed from the same element as prose. The difference lies in the different combination of these elements and the difference of purposes. Poetry is for immediate object pleasure, for Coleridge, and he insisted on the organic unity of composition which influences the reader or audience. So a romantic critic's job is to find out this organic unity and those elements by which an immediate object pleasure can be evolved